I had a total of 5 deadly flares of my disease over a 3-year period and had my last rites read to me in 2010, said goodbye to my family on multiple occasions. It was horrible.
Doctors told him he was going to die. He had his last rites read to him, and then he went out and found a drug that would actually save his life. And now he has started a whole company using AI and has subsequently saved thousands of lives repurposing drugs. There is so much power and potential in the pharmaceutical business. I can't even believe I'm saying it, but I want you to listen to this interview through to the end, because not only is it a story of somebody who almost died 5 times from a very rare disease, and not only got married and had kids and started this whole successful business, but he is starting what I would describe, a movement that you are going to want to know about. And in the end, it comes down to taking action and putting hope into action. Welcome to Getting Open. I'm your host, Andrea Miller. Before we get started, and you're going to think, wait, what? But we talk about the pharmaceutical industry, the health insurance industry in this interview at great length. And I personally am calling for these CEOs to take action in a way that genuinely serves the greater good and not just their profitability. And so I'm curious, Luigi, what are your thoughts? Should he be exonerated? Because ultimately, when it comes to pharmaceutical companies, when it comes to health insurance, and when it comes down to what my guest is doing, his pioneering work, it really comes down to, are we getting the kind of healthcare and the kind of mental health care that we as a society deserve? Let me know in the comments and let's get into it. David Fajgenbaum, MD, MA, MSc, is co-founder and president of EveryCure and one of the youngest faculty members ever to receive tenure at the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. A physician, scientist, and patient battling a deadly disease, he discovered and repurposed a treatment that saved his own life, a story he chronicled in his national best-selling memoir, Chasing My Cure, which is being adapted into a film by Forrest Gump producer Wendy Finerman. Dr. Fajgenbaum has since advanced 13 more repurposed treatments for cancers and rare diseases and co-founded EveryCure to unlock more hidden cures from existing medicines. He has been profiled by the New York Times, Good Morning America, Today, and Forbes 30 Under 30, and honored with awards, including the Atlas Award alongside then VP Joe Biden, Philadelphia Citizen of the Year Award, and named to the 2025 Time 100 Health list of the world's most influential people in health. And it doesn't stop there. Dr. Fajgenbaum earned a BS from Georgetown University, where I might add, he played D1 football as a quarterback. So, I mean, like I'm not making this up, you guys. MSc from the University of Oxford, MD from the University of Pennsylvania, and an MBA from Wharton. Oh my God. And I'm just going to add this. Superstar New York Times bestselling author and Wharton professor Adam Grant rightly says, I've never met a more inspiring person. You're a little intimidating. David, welcome.
Well, thanks so much for having me. You should know our football team was really bad at Georgetown, so that's not that good of a superlative.
Listen, my son thinks it's really cool. He is a almost 16-year-old football player. And when I told him about you, he was interested and impressed with all of the other accomplishments, but you're playing D1 football was like, that's the coolest thing.
Well, I appreciate that. At the time, that's all I could think about when I was his age. So I appreciate, I can relate to that feeling.
So David, your story is extraordinary. Do you mind summarizing it to just really allow my listeners to hear it directly from you?
Sure. So I went from being this healthy medical student. I had decided I wanted to become a doctor. Remember my mom, she passed away when I was a sophomore in college. And I was well on my way to fulfilling this promise that I made to her that I would try to treat patients in her memory when I just got critically ill out of nowhere. My liver, my kidneys, my bone marrow all started to shut down for an unknown cause. And I was hospitalized in the intensive care unit. A retinal hemorrhage made me blind in my left eye. I needed transfusions every day just to keep me alive. And it was so frightening, Andrea. I mean, I was terrified. I was heartbroken. I had this amazing girlfriend that I wanted to get married to one day, and I was being told by doctors that I wasn't going to make it. And I was eventually diagnosed with a disease called idiopathic multicentric Castleman disease. But unfortunately, even with the diagnosis, I learned that there were no treatments. So I was given a lot of chemotherapy because my doctors thought, let's just try to give chemo. Castleman's involves your immune system attacking your vital organs. So they thought maybe if we give you a bunch of chemo, maybe that could stop it. And it worked temporarily, but then I would relapse. And I had a total of 5 deadly flares of my disease over a 3-year period, and had my last rites read to me in 2010, said goodbye to my family on multiple occasions. It was horrible, Andrea. But by the time I had my 4th flare and my doctors again explained to me, we're out of options, that's when I started thinking to myself, well, I know you're telling me we're out of options, but you've just given me a bunch of different chemotherapies and they didn't work long term, but they got my disease into remission. So maybe there's something else, maybe there's an 8th drug out there. And that became my mission, was to try to find something. And I eventually discovered a drug called sirolimus that's made for another disease, had never been used before for Castleman's, and it saved my life. 2 weeks ago marked 12 years that I've been in remission.
Oh my God. Hallelujah. Well, so let's start from there. So, well, actually, you went on to create a nonprofit on the back of your own experience of finding a drug that wasn't FDA tested for your condition. Will you talk about EveryCure a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So the drug that saved my life was FDA approved for organ transplantation, and we proved it would work for Castleman's. And so, the moment that drug started saving my life 12 years ago, all I've been able to think about is, okay, if that drug could treat my disease, how many more drugs are there out there that could treat other diseases, right? And this concept, what's often called drug repurposing, and it happens occasionally. And there are these occasional examples like Viagra, which we've all heard was repurposed from heart disease to erectile dysfunction, but most people don't realize it's also been repurposed for a rare pediatric lung disease. Kids were dying because they weren't getting enough blood flow to their lungs. Now Viagra keeps them alive. And there are many more examples like that happen sort of randomly and spontaneously. But what we do through EveryCure, this nonprofit we started 3 years ago, is to try to create a system to systematically look across all 4,000 drugs, all 18,000 diseases, to find the very best matches across all of them. So that way we can take the best repurposing ideas to use a drug that might have been intended for blood pressure to actually treat pancreatic cancer, or you name the match, and then we move them forward into the laboratory and in clinical trials. Then we take them to patients. And the reason it was so critical to create this nonprofit EveryCure is that in our current system, the vast majority of drugs that are already FDA approved are already generic, which means it's not profitable to find a new use for them. So the drugs that could save patients' lives tomorrow are the very drugs that we don't spend any time and resources on as a system. So you have to have a nonprofit that's here just to save lives and to go after the things that are not profitable. So, and by the way, congratulations and thank you. I mean, it is breathtaking to think of how your personal story and how this drug that wasn't prescribed for Castleman disease saved your life, and how that's motivated you. As I understand, you've raised $100 million from the Audacious Project. I mean, you are really galvanizing this giant movement behind you. And I want to talk about your use of, maybe that's where we go next, how you describe, or actually, let me read what the New York Times says. The New York Times says, doctors told him he was going to die, then AI saved his life. Is that actually true? Because when I think of when you were so ill, I mean, AI was out there, but is that accurate? Were you, ChatGPT wasn't there. Yeah, that headline's actually referring to a patient that's life I saved with AI. Got it. So that headline's referring to another patient. Yes. Okay. the article talks about me saving my life, but that headline's about another patient that I saved.
Got it. Okay. So every cure. So will you talk about how AI is being incorporated by your nonprofit, by Every Cure?
Absolutely. And so, when I first got sick 15 years ago and then discovered this drug 12 years ago, you're right. This was way pre artificial intelligence where it is now. There's sort of, old school machine learning models that existed, but it was nothing like it is today. And then really over the last 12 years, so I joined the faculty here at Penn and did the best I could with this amazing lab that I have here to repurpose as many drugs as we possibly could. We've done this now a total of 14 times, where we've taken a drug made for one disease and used it for another disease. We've been able to save thousands of patients' lives doing so. And as the years were going by, I was getting more and more excited about all the people we were helping, but also more and more heartbroken about all the people we weren't helping. My lab here could only do so much, one disease, one drug at a time. And in parallel, just as you're pointing out, there was incredible progress being made for artificial intelligence. Think about what ChatGPT can do and even the progress just in the last 3 years since it was released. And so about 5 years or so ago, I spent a lot of time with my co-founder for Every Cure, Grant Mitchell. We were med school and business school classmates together. And Grant had spent a lot of time utilizing machine learning, really old school machine learning, for drug companies to try to find new uses for their drugs, sort of one drug at a time. We thought, what if we could come together and utilize artificial intelligence to really scale the approach that we were taking in my lab to find new uses for medicines? And 3 years ago, we launched this nonprofit, Every Cure, and we use an AI platform that scans the world's knowledge of every drug, every disease, every gene, every protein. Imagine all of biomedical knowledge getting scanned by this platform and then scoring how likely every single drug, all 4,000 of them, is to treat all 18,000 human diseases. So that means that it's a total of 75 million possibilities. If you tried to treat every disease with every drug, you'd have 75 million attempts. Well, AI can actually score and rank relatively among those 75 million, which are the best opportunities to help people. And then our nonprofit, Every Cure, our team can look at the top of the list and say, oh, wow, among all the things that AI recommends, this looks really promising. And we just march our way down the list.
So let me, it is breathtaking. And for so many people who feel AI is taking their jobs and all the doom and gloom, what you're showing and your team of people are showing are some of the best use cases. But let me ask you this about, and I'm not an expert in this area at all, but I've understood that IBM had something called Watson, and I don't even know how long ago. Is Watson similar to what you've developed? Do you partner with IBM? I mean, how does that fit into what you're doing?
Yeah, great question. So, Watson was developed to essentially be a competitor to doctors, to say, like, you can either go to your oncologist and figure out what cancer treatment you should get, or you can go to Watson and Watson will tell you what cancer treatment you should get. And I know many of us were really excited about this. This was back in the 2010s, so excited about what this could mean and this idea that, the machine, doesn't make mistakes. But what we learned from it is that, at least back in the 2010s, oncologists with decades of experience treating cancer were actually better than Watson at deciding what to do for your cancer. I think the big problem with the Watson experiment and that project was that the idea was that it was going to be autonomous, work on its own without humans, that it was just AI versus a human. What we do at Every Cure is not, is it an AI recommendation or a human recommendation? We use AI to figure out what things should us humans look at. So, us humans, we can't quantify how likely every drug is to treat every disease. We can't calculate 75 million things and then go, oh, this is the best of the 75 million. So we let AI do the first and best attempt it can at ranking all drugs versus all diseases. What drugs for what diseases look most promising? We let it take the first pass. And then us humans look at the top of the list. And so every month, our medical team reviews about 1,000 of the best repurposing ideas from this AI platform. And we look at things like lidocaine for breast cancer or losartan for pancreatic cancer, or you name the match, right? Every drug versus every disease. But we look at the top 1,000 every month. And so over the course of the last year, we have crossed over 10,000 repurposing ideas that we've reviewed. But it's us humans who are looking at those top hits. And I think that's where Watson failed, but where I think we are going to succeed, and where we are succeeding is that AI can take us only so far, and then us humans have to take it the rest of the way.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, a couple of things come to mind. One, you describe in your beautiful book a patient, I think when you were in your residency, named George. And
first patient I ever took care of.
Yeah, what's so apparent in the research that I've heard about is that patient outcomes improve dramatically, and the data bears this out, when there's great communication from their caregiver and compassion. And so it was fun to listen to your book and hear that out of the gate. And I go, okay, I like this guy. Like, he gets it. And what strikes me, what you're describing, what Every Cure is doing, really is that hybrid, using AI and the research and the data, but then transmuting it through that personal connection. In fact, my niece, shout out to Shreya, she graduated a couple of years ago from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and Atul Gawande gave her commencement.
Wow.
And he was talking, and it was such a great speech. And he was talking about, in an age of AI and all this technology, he said, but what none of that can, I'm paraphrasing, but what none of that can replace is, and I'm screaming, I'm not even at the plate, I'm like listening to this, watching it on Zoom, and I'm thinking, he's going to say caring. And he goes, human caring. I'm like, okay, I do it. And so I really want to call that out, because when I think about in this age of AI and technology, and you personally, in fact, the other quick thing I want to shout out from your beautiful book, you credit your mom, who you described and so tragically died of brain cancer when you were so young. You describe her with a willpower and a strength, not just to find the silver lining, but to create them. And I was like, oh, like mother, like son. And I call that out just because for everybody listening, it's like the most terrible thing happened for you as a young man, and how you've transmuted that as a doctor and now as an entrepreneur. It is, I mean, that's why Adam Grant is calling you the most inspiring person he's ever met. But I connect the dots back to this deep sense of caring that I do think is so important, particularly in your field, and how AI can be amplified with caring. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Oh, no, I so appreciate you saying that. I think that, first of all, I just feel so fortunate to be alive. I'm not supposed to be here. I should have died many years ago from a disease that's taken so many others. And the fact that there was a drug that could save me, all I can think about is, how many more people aren't being saved by these drugs that are out there. And so I feel thankful for the progress, but I feel like there's still so much work ahead. And I'm so glad you mentioned my amazing mom. Watching her battle with brain cancer, also just, or not also, it literally led me to say, I want to dedicate my life to find treatments for patients like her. And so that experience of watching her suffering led me just to say, this is how I want to spend my time. And so you mentioned the patient George. He also was suffering from a brain tumor. He was one of the first patients I ever took care of. And as you remember from the book, the really the most important point from that experience with George was that the thing that helped him the most was not chemotherapy or some medical intervention. It was that I got the chance to learn about his family and about his daughter, and to be able to actually connect him and his daughter for an important conversation. And he was so proud of his daughter. He was so proud also of these medical exams we were doing. We were doing these tests called mental status exams, and he was doing so well on them. He just wanted to do well. He was, struggling in the hospital, but to be able to do well and succeed. And for me, that was so eye-opening. After coming off of losing my mom to brain cancer, where all I could think about was she only lived for 15 months, and how tragic that is, that someone, so amazing and with the best care in the world, could die within 15 months of brain cancer. But the experience with George just pointed out to me that it's sort of not all about drugs and survival and, the length of time, but it's about what you do in that time. And it's about, as you said, about caring. So I just feel so fortunate I got a chance to interact with George and luckiest person in the world to have my mom as my mom. But there's still so much work ahead. And I can't think of anything more exciting than the fact that Every Cure is utilizing drugs that already exist, technology that's now available to help these people who are suffering. And we can really help them in the short term as opposed to, decades from now.
Well, right. And you talking, in your comments about how you didn't have 10 years and $1 billion, right? And so then that you created Every Cure to leverage what exists. But let me ask about that. How does it happen? So if somebody has, whether it's a disease, when we think of, cancers and so forth versus like even a condition, I mean, are you guys treating conditions that are maybe not life-threatening as well as those more serious diseases?
Great question. So we use this platform that, scores every drug versus every disease as a starting place. And within the 18,000 human diseases are things that maybe could be considered as a more non-life-threatening or more, conditions that you can live in, maybe affect quality of life. They're all part of our platform. So every drug and every disease is literally scored against one another. And our medical team looks at the very top. And when they look at it, the first question is it likely that this drug is actually going to make a difference? Like based on how the drug works and how the disease works, is it likely that it's going to help? The second question is, if it helps, how severe is this disease? How much impact can we make? If it's a really bad disease, obviously you can have a major impact. If it's not as bad a disease, obviously less impact. And the third question is, can we feasibly make a difference here? So for some horrible diseases that are slow and progressive, it may take years and years and years and hundreds of millions of dollars to do the kind of trials necessary to prove that the drug works. And so those would be diseases and drugs where it's not really feasible for our nonprofit to be able to solve them. And so we think about all of those things. How likely is it to work? How much of an impact can we have? And how feasible is it for us in terms of the limited resources we have as a nonprofit to really make a difference? And then we have to make tough decisions about, do we pursue this drug for this disease or that drug for that disease? We tend to go for the more severe diseases. Not all of them are life-threatening. Some of them are very debilitating. A number of pediatric conditions where kids will live full lives, but they'll have severe intellectual disabilities. They'll have horrible neurodevelopmental delays, physical challenges. Those are conditions that don't limit life, but they limit quality of life significantly. And so we certainly go after them if we can.
So are you saying mostly what Every Cure is addressing are rare diseases, or are there, of the 14 that and did I get this right, 14 diseases that you guys have been able to find an alternative drug for?
So we've 14 drugs that we've repurposed in the past, and nine that we're actively working on right now. And so the 14 was really worked on primarily in my lab here at Penn, but now there's 9 that Every Cure is advancing. And that 9 really ranges from very rare. There's a condition called Bachman-Bupp that's only been diagnosed in 20 kids that we're aware of. We suspect there's probably hundreds more that are undiagnosed, but that's really rare, right? 20 to a few hundred. That's one of our conditions, but those kids spend their lives on feeding tubes and really like immobile. And there's an amazing drug that can transform their lives. The five of the six patients that have been treated with it, pioneered by Dr. Bachman and Dr. Bupp, have had amazing responses. And so that's on the rarest side. I mean, that's about as rare of a disease as you can find. And then the more common side is we have a program for breast cancer, one of the most common cancers in existence. And we've got a really promising drug that we're excited about. We're currently testing in the lab and also evaluating clinically. So it's really the full gamut. We do find that there seem to be more low-hanging fruit, obvious treatments in more rare diseases, because as you can imagine, the more common the diseases, the more that our market is incentivized to find a drug for it. And so we don't care if it's rare or common. We just want to help people. But the market has sort of made it such that the rare stuff is usually the more obvious opportunities to help people.
Well, and I want to come back to that because you've expounded on how the economics shape this decision making in the pharmaceutical business. But I want to park that for just a moment and stay with people listening. And they're over here saying, oh my goodness, I've tried everything. And my doctor, and you talk about this in your book too with your uncle. And God bless doctors. They're, human beings who are doing their best. And yet there are, and even like your doctor said, you had great doctors. There's nothing we can do for you, David.
Yep.
And you took matters into your own hands. And then you talk about your uncle, who also was suffering from cancer, was with a doctor, a team of doctors, said, we can't help you. And they switched doctors. Right? Go ahead.
And I think, yeah, absolutely. I think that it points to a few things. One is that it's really important to go to the experts. I mean, you've got to get to the experts, whoever they are for your disease. Get in your car and just drive to go see them. It is so important. And the second is, even the experts don't have all the answers if the world doesn't have all the answers, right? If there's no treatment for angiosarcoma, then an angiosarcoma doctor can't recommend a treatment for you. But the big difference here, and what you're pointing out, is that for angiosarcoma, there was no known treatment, but there actually was a treatment. Pembrolizumab is very effective for a fraction of people with angiosarcoma. And at the time that my uncle was diagnosed with angiosarcoma, that horrible form of cancer, no one had ever connected the dots between the fact that these tumors from people with this form of cancer have increased levels of something called PD-L1, which means that they're more likely than not to respond to a PD-1 inhibitor. And so a paper had been published 3 years earlier about PD-L1 being elevated. Many people knew that PD-1 inhibitors worked on cancers with increased PD-L1, but no one had connected the dots to say, well, why don't we try pembrolizumab for this uniformly fatal cancer? And so we connected those dots. We gave the drug to my uncle, and he's been doing great for over 9 years. He walked my cousin down the aisle on her wedding day in Nashville this September. And so, this is an example where he went to see the experts. The experts didn't have the answer, and there was a drug that was actually available. I think that's rarer than. Fortunately, that's rarer than. That's quite rare. I don't think doctors are missing things here, all over the place. I think it's just tricky because doctors, have a limited amount of time, and there has never been a system in place like we now have with every cure that's constantly scanning for these matches so we can move them forward. So the doctor doesn't have to make those matches. Let the doctor, take care of patients, be caring, get the right drugs to people, but let someone else do the work to match these things together so the doctor knows what their options are.
So how, and thanks for that explanation. When it comes to somebody, who has an illness, are they coming to Evercure to say, hey, here are my conditions. Will you guys help me? Are you hearing from doctors, or are you guys independently, you described that you're every single month you're evaluating through this different criteria, how to repurpose these drugs. How does your process work?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that because our approach at Evercure is to let AI tell us the best opportunities to help people, and then we go down the list, top to bottom, looking for AI might predict this is useful, but what is the best one that can help people, have a major impact, and then also be feasible? And that's the way that we do things, is we basically say us humans want to find the best opportunities to save people across all drugs and all diseases, which is different than what typically happens in healthcare and in research, where people come to doctors or people go to research labs and say, work on my disease, find a drug for my disease. So it's just what we're doing is unusual, but I think it's essential. What we're doing is saying we just want to find the best opportunities to help people all around the world. And we're not going to wait for the random chance that the right person comes to us with the right condition to help someone that we could find out. We've got to do this systematically and not, drug disease match by drug disease match, which is really tough because that means that we get contacted by hundreds and sometimes thousands of patients a month saying, will you work on my disease? And it's heartbreaking. But what we have to say is your disease is in our platform. Every single disease is included in our platform. And our platform helps us to find the very best matches across all drugs and diseases. And I can't wait until we find something that's going to work for you. Right now, we've got 9 active programs ranging from the really rare to the really common. And every month we look through 1,000 more and we add 1 to 2 every month. And so as time goes on and as resources are available to us, we are going to keep working as hard as we possibly can. But it is really tough because when we started Evercure, we could have made Evercure a nonprofit that tries to find a drug for you or the next person who comes to see us. And that could have been how we focused this, but we didn't think that that would be fixing the problem. And that's that there's quote unquote low hanging fruit that's sitting out there that no one's searching for.
Let me ask you this. In that New York Times article, which we'll link to in the bio because it's so good, there's a line that says, the New York Times article talked about how an AI model suggested a 19-year-old patient debilitated by chronic vomiting try isopropyl alcohol inhaled through the nose. And there's a quote saying, essentially, we ran a query that said, show us every proposed treatment that there's ever been in the history of medicine for nausea, from somebody named Matt Might, a professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, who leads the institute that developed their model. It sounds like maybe something similar to what you guys are doing.
Very similar.
Are you looking at, like, when I think functional medicine and mind-body medicine and, just this common household substance as a way to help somebody. Now, I realize, if you're chronically vomiting, that's a really poor quality of life. Is every cure, is there either now or in your roadmap to use things like diet, to use things like meditation and mindfulness and visualization and these kinds of things that have shown promise, but maybe less at scale?
It's a great question. Really, where we go is pharmaceutical products and nutraceuticals. So if it's a product,
and what do you mean by nutraceuticals?
Yeah, so amino acids, vitamins, minerals.
Okay, like supplements.
Supplements, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. So we think about when we match every drug versus every disease, we're talking about some sort of pharmacologic intervention. And that doesn't mean that we don't believe that there's a lot of non-pharmacologic interventions that are really important and that people should absolutely pursue. But it's that we need to focus somewhere. And what we focus on are the 4,000 FDA-approved drugs. Plus, within those FDA-approved drugs, there are vitamins and minerals and supplements. I mean, what's sort of interesting, the drug that I'm on, sirolimus, it's not a vitamin or mineral, but it's a naturally occurring compound that's found in the soil of Easter Island, the island of Rapa Nui. That's why my drug is sometimes called rapamycin, because it was found on the island of Rapa Nui. Completely naturally occurring compound. Like I said, literally you could dig it out of the soil. But what's really clear about it is it's great at turning off this one part of the immune system. So it's an amazing drug. And so we look at anything and everything. And a lot of times people will say, metformin is a diabetes drug, so therefore it should be used for diabetes. And we say, well, no. Metformin is an AMP kinase inhibitor, and it does these 7 other things, which means it could be useful for diabetes or it could be useful for something else. But we don't like to think about drugs in terms of the disease that it was intended for. We like to think about drugs in terms of what they do in the body and how they could then be useful for various conditions.
Oh my God, it's so exciting. In fact, what you're talking about, it reminds me, I used to drag my kids who lived in New York City for 19 years. I used to drag my kids far more than they appreciated to the New York Botanical Garden. And I remember there was this amazing special exhibit that talked about the connection between literally the soil and the jungle and what's happening in nature. And this was probably 10 years ago, so I don't remember the details, but I remember my mind being blown away. I have a cousin who's shout out to Anna, who's a pharmacist. And I sent a link to her, and it's like, wow, if you're just like a normal person, you don't think about these things, but the botanical garden installation was talking about the teeny tiny fraction of what has been developed by pharmaceutical companies and nutraceutical companies as healing substances. And it just strikes me talking to you that's I would expect a whole other, like, every cure 5.0 on steroids to go into the Amazon and to go to places like Easter Island and say, there are so many things that Mother Nature has given us to be cured.
I love it. Yeah, you're exactly right. There are so many more substances, and I saw someone try to put a number to it. It's a prediction like 10 to the like 32 different potential compounds. So like 32 zeros is how big that number is of things that could be used in people. And the reason that I love that we start with the 4,000 FDA approved drugs is because for those 4,000 drugs, We know their safety profile. They're not all perfect. I mean, think about the chemotherapies I've got. They've got bad safety profiles in some cases, but you know what they are. So one, you understand the bad of them potentially. Second, you understand how they work. You know that this drug works in this way because it got FDA approval. And third, the drug has actually helped a disease. There's a lot of drugs that you can study in a bunch of diseases and they don't help anything. And so the fact that you start with things that are relatively safe, you know that they can have the potential to help a disease, and you know how they work, you're essentially sort of like, 90+% of the way there relative to things that haven't been studied at all. Now, of course, the advantage we have is that these are well-known compounds that we're trying to come up with new uses for them, and they're already manufactured, of course. They're already at your CVS, for example. But the advantage of all these other compounds you mentioned that haven't yet been discovered is that there could be amazing healing properties and, these diamonds in the rough that could just be, game changers. For us, we like the stuff that's on the 1 yard line or the 5 yard line, right? Because they're already manufactured. That we know so much about them. So if we get them in the end zone, you can make a difference rapidly and for low cost. But I agree, some of the things that are sort of further away have tremendous potential.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. And just even in your personal case, let me ask you an irreverent question. Why isn't Aetna or Oxford, and maybe they are, but I presume, since I've done a lot of research on you and I haven't heard about any of the insurance companies stepping up and saying, you know what, this could actually radically change the face of the healthcare system. Have you been talking to any of these people?
I completely agree with you. And I think insurance companies will get behind what we're doing. I think in part the reason they haven't is that I don't think we've done a good enough job reaching out to them. And so if you work for an insurance company and you're listening to this, reach out to us, health insurance company. Yes, because I don't think we've done a good enough job reaching out to them. Our first year was so focused on fundraising to get started. Our second year on building out our team, and our third year is utilizing this AI platform. And in parallel, we certainly could have engaged health insurance companies more, but we just really haven't. And it's not because we don't think that they'd be really excited about it. I think that, when I talk about what our drugs have been able to do and what they can do, these are, the drugs we have for new disease areas they haven't been used in. There's two groups that come to mind that immediately benefit. So one are patients. These are like, I'm alive. Many other patients are alive because of a drug that wasn't meant for them. That's obvious. And the second, just as you said, it isn't the insurance companies who can save money, because when you treat a horrible disease with an inexpensive drug, you save lots of money for that company and for the entire system. And so I think we just need to do a better job of engaging directly with these companies. And I think they would become our biggest cheerleader. We just need to figure out the right ways to structure these sorts of things.
Yeah, it does strike. I mean, it strikes me, especially, I think it's Moore's law that describes the rapid rate of computer processing. And I would expect that is going to, the conversation with you is probably going to be pretty radically different in 2 to 3 years, given the impact of Moore's law on what you guys can do. And honestly, I feel like the smart money Luigi, hello, like, it's a terrible thing to say, but people are understandably, righteously pissed off at our healthcare, the entire healthcare system, but particularly the insurance companies. I would think that some bold, brazen, smart CEO would go, I want to be the first person that says, hey, we're behind what these guys are doing, because we actually, back to caring, because we actually care, and because caring is a great business model, right?
Exactly. And it gets away from, the bad reputation they often have is saying what you can't take. But what if instead of saying you can take this, what if they said, let's help find something that you can take that could help you and that's low cost and it could save your life. So I totally agree. I think we need to do a better job on our end.
Well, and totally. And I think of my mom, she's suffering from dementia and COPD, and my dad's a veteran. And so they have really good.
So sorry to hear that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. She's getting good care, but I think she's on a drug that if they had to pay for, it'd be like $7,000 a month. Right. And so when I think again about the work you're doing, and I do want to spend, before you jump, I want to talk, because you talk a lot about the economics of this, and I do think that is extremely important. The economics that impact how drugs are developed. But I say this because when I think about, that's crazy. Very few people can afford a $7,000 per month drug. So, I mean, my parents have good healthcare coverage, but that's crazy, right? And yes, I understand there are major costs to developing drugs, but I would even expect, or let me actually ask you this, because you're the expert. Is that going to change in the next, say, 3 to 5 years? Will the cost of developing new drugs come down, do you think?
Yeah. I don't think they're going to come down all that much. I think that AI, so right now, most of artificial intelligence is focused on finding brand new drugs and trying to guess or predict what new disease that drug can work in. And that's really important. We need more drugs. It needs to happen to be able to save and treat these horrible diseases. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this, but out of the 18,000 diseases that affect humans, we only have treatments for 4,000 of them. There's literally 14,000 diseaes with no treatments. Now, of course, the majority of them are rare, but when you add them up, that accounts for like 10% of the U.S. population. So,
well, let me just interrupt there, because what you talk about is based on that math, about a quarter of every drug, every time somebody is going to the drugstore, drug repurposing is happening and has been happening informally in that regard, which actually kind of blew my mind. I didn't realize it was that rampant.
It blew my mind too, the fact that, we've only got treatments for about a quarter of all diseases. And then, so what do doctors do? Well, they try drugs off label. So they're trying 20 to 30% of the prescriptions doctors write are off label. So doctors are trying things, but it's one-offs and it's not systematic. But I mentioned the fact that there's such a long way to go. Because we're going to keep developing one drug at a time. It costs between $1 and $2 billion to make a single drug. It takes 10 to 15 years. And now, if we use AI to shorten the first couple years of that trajectory by quickly discovering a new compound and maybe getting it right to animals in short order, you're really only cutting off the first year or two. The really long part of drug development is all of the human clinical trial testing. And you have to test people for years, drugs for years and years. And that's not really going to shorten. So I don't actually see the cost or the time for new drug development going down. I think that's even more of a reason why we need to do drug repurposing, because the beauty of drug repurposing is that the drug's already on the market. We already know its safety profile. It's already available for one thing. So I think that I'm excited about the new drugs that are going to get discovered using AI, but I'm really thankful that there's an entity through every cure that's trying to look at existing drugs.
Well, so let me ask that, and I know you need to go in a few minutes. Will you just talk about the economics? Two-part question. One, I would ask you, if you're in touch with executives in the health insurance industry, are you in touch with executives at places like Pfizer and Merck and other of the major pharmaceutical companies? And how do they think? Do they like what you're doing? Do they dislike what you're doing? I could see it being a little bit of a frenemy situation over here.
Yeah. What's amazing is everyone I talk to that works in the pharmaceutical industry immediately just loves the fact that every cure exists. And the reason they love it so much is because they'll say, David, just last week, we had to decide to pursue this drug for this disease, but not this other disease that we know it's going to work in. We know it's going to work in this other disease, but we can't pursue, 5 diseases at once. We have to pursue 1 or 2. And so they know how valuable the nonprofit Every Cure is, because they live having to shut down programs all the time for diseases that they know it's going to work in, but they can't justify the expenses, because it is expensive to develop drugs. It just costs lots of money to do it. And these companies are for-profit companies. They have to figure out, where they can maximize their profit. So they love what we're doing because they know that the opportunity is there. And at the same time, we still haven't figured out exactly how to work with them. And I sort of blame ourselves a little bit, like I do with health insurance companies, where what we want to do with pharmaceutical companies is we want them to tell us what are all the diseases you thought about for all of your drugs. Not just the 1 or 2 diseases that you went after, but what are the other 10 or 15 diseases that you thought about, that you came up with a plan for, but you had to abandon because the company picked the 1 or 2 diseases to go after. That to me feels like such a great collaboration opportunity. And yet I still haven't landed that with any partner pharmaceutical companies. And again, I sort of blame ourselves because we haven't really systematically and rigorously gone, company to company and provided a proposal to them. So we got to do a better job. Hopefully 2026 is the year where we establish these broader partnerships with insurance companies, with drug companies. That way we get this information and we get these drugs to patients.
Well, honestly, it's so exciting. And I'm an entrepreneur. I've been running a business for a long time. And so the fact that you guys are 3 years in and you've already done what you've done, like, huge props to you, right? And, it's like you got to find that success and like the proof points before the big partners are going to come in. So to me, you're right on time. But I'm going to share something that, again, I don't know what's in the water for me to say, a little irreverent, but I'm going to do it anyway. I heard something the other day developed by Aristotle, and it's called first principles thinking. Have you heard of this?
I don't know. If I'm interested to hear more.
All right. So, and I say this again, because what you're doing is so revolutionary and good for all of us, right? And at a time when there's a lot of, let's just say a lot of challenges out there. So it's first principles thinking versus analogy thinking. And analogy thinking is what's always been done. And I'm saying this in part because what you said as well, they have to, meaning the pharmaceutical companies, and I would even contend the healthcare companies would, the CEOs would say, yeah, that's what we have to do. We have to maximize profits. Okay. And so when I think about this idea, and Elon Musk is somebody who has used first principles thinking, this isn't an endorsement of Elon Musk himself. It is just it's using the example, okay, before everybody gets their, backs up. And the idea of what he's done to build rockets for SpaceX, he was able to do it at a fraction of the cost using this idea of first principles thinking, as I understand it. And it's, you just keep asking what actually needs to be true. And it leads to a radical shift in thinking and perspectives, and often radical reconstructions. And so when I think about these healthcare companies and the pharmaceutical companies, and I understand shareholder value and I understand needing to profit, I also understand at a certain point, if you're willing to apply first principles thinking and be that leader, be that person who's willing to take a radical departure from what everybody else is doing. And instead of that analogy thinking and partnering with somebody like you and with Every Cure, I mean, that's how you disrupt an entire freaking industry. I mean, I think about Steve Jobs. Here's to the crazy ones. Here's to the rebels. Right. And how he upended, the music industry. And I think the music industry seems to be doing just fine. Thank you very much. Right. And all the good things that come from that bold, courageous thinking. And in part, I think, David, I'm so maybe fired up and willing to be a little irreverent right now because what you're doing is radical. And it's not just saving lives. It's like, I think of your story, it's like so motivating, like the art of the possible. In fact, because I know you need to go, I'd love for you to respond to that. And then I'd love for you to maybe end on your definition of hope, because it's not a passive definition, but I'd love for you to respond, tell me I'm wrong if you think I'm wrong, but I welcome your reaction.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that my sort of, as I have gotten into this world, first as a med student and physician, scientist, patient, all that sort of stuff, I have been so shocked. Like when this drug started saving my life, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. So there's drugs that are at the CVS that could help people today, but we spend billions of dollars and decades to find one new drug at a time that could help someone 2 decades from now. And we spend $0 on looking at the things that we already have. Like, what am I missing here? And so I think that,
the
it's just
emperor
like,
has no clothes, David.
I'm just
right?
sort of like,
isn't that it?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the analogy that I would use, not to use analogous thinking, but is imagine there's like this like giant mountain in front of us, and there's this long line of people that are marching up that mountain to develop this drug, and they're spending billions and billions of dollars. Tons of people are failing. Every once in a while, someone gets to the top of the mountain and you get this approved drug. That drug works for one disease. Maybe they'll use it for a second disease. And I'm like watching this. This is what our whole system does. We spend trillions of dollars doing this, literally trillions of dollars. And then I feel like I'm at the bottom of the hill, and I'm like, well, wait, guys, there's this, like, we can just walk around the hill if we want. Like I know you guys are all falling off going up that thing, but like we can go around it. And actually on the other side of the hill, there's more than just one disease that we could treat. We could treat many diseases with each one of these drugs. And it seems so simple, and drug repurposing is challenging. Doing clinical trials is challenging. Making these matches is challenging. But at the end of the day, it is so much easier than climbing this giant mountain that everyone is doing. And it's, to your point, it's how it's always been done. But we can walk around the mountain for 1% of the cost 10% of the time. Like, and we can help just as many people. That's the crazy thing. It's not like because it's a new drug, it's going to help more people than an old drug. It's just that it's not profitable if it's an old drug. And so I couldn't agree with you more. And I guess my philosophy, this is now my third nonprofit that I started, first for grieving college students, and then to defeat Castleman's, and now to solve this issue with drug development. With each of these, I think I've sort of taken the mindset of, we've got to disrupt, and whoever wants to come along can come along with us. But like, we're going to start running around this mountain. And at some point, hopefully we can get some of those mountain climbers just to walk around the mountain with us. So for me, it's been less like, I'm going to persuade Pfizer or Merck or you name the group to start doing what we're doing. I'm just going to start doing it. And we're going to help as many people as we can. We're going to garner as many resources as we can. And then hopefully, people start walking around this mountain with me.
Amen. Well, you're doing analogy thinking and not even realizing it. Bravo to you. So I would and thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you. I would love for you to close really with two things. One, anything else, call to action, anything else you'd like people to know about your story or every cure, or, anything else in your industry. And I'd also love for you to talk about your definition of hope.
I'd love that. Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for giving me the opportunity to chat with you today and to share a little bit about the work we're doing and our mission. What I think probably came across from our conversation is that there's an incredible opportunity to help a lot of people with the drugs we already have, but it's not the kind of thing that we can do alone. And so happy to share a few ways that anyone who's listening or watching can contribute. One of those ways is by telling us about drugs that you've been given off label. If your doctor, you've got X condition and your doctor, after many attempts, is like, I'm going to try this other thing and it worked for you, let us know. Go to everycure.org/ideas and tell us about a drug that was used for your disease that maybe it's not usually used for, because that nugget of information, we can check our AI platform. We can see how it's performing versus all the other repurposing ideas. And maybe we'll go do a clinical trial and maybe millions of people will get on that drug because you told us that drug helped you. So help us help a lot of people. So
and
one
what's
is
that URL again?
It's everycure.org/ideas. So we want to get all of the repurposing ideas possible. And so if you got a drug and it helps you, please tell us. The second is through fundraising. So we fund large clinical trials, laboratory work, awareness raising, and that just requires funding because we can't generate revenue. We're not a for-profit company. We're a nonprofit. We rely on people to support this work. And fortunately, we also are supported through the federal government and through philanthropists, in addition to just people that want to help us to save lives. And then the third is raising awareness, because a lot of times we can do the work that proves the drug works, but actually getting patients on the drug actually requires getting the word out. And so sometimes it's the difference between sharing one of our posts in social media and someone receiving a medicine that we've advanced. So literally, we can all be a part of this. We don't have a sales force. We're not a big drug company with a giant budget for things like that, but we share things like this on social media. So if you go to everycure.org, you can follow us on social media. I have the most difficult last name in the world to spell, David Fajgenbaum. You can find me on social media. Hopefully, if you type it in, it's not too hard. And we share about this all the time. So sharing what we're sharing can actually help us to help a lot of people. And then I think I appreciate you also sharing about my book. And in my book, I share about the lessons I learned from nearly dying on 5 separate occasions. And I wanted to write this book so badly because I want you to learn those lessons so before you have to go through, having your last rites read to you so you can put them into action. And then the last question you had around hope, I always thought of hope as a sort of a passive idea where, like, you hope for a thing and it might come true. But I think the kind of hope that I love is the hope where you hope for something and then you ask yourself, what am I hoping for? And then you say, what action can I take today, tomorrow, and the next day to make that happen? So for me, I was hoping for a treatment for my disease so I could get married to my girlfriend, Caitlin, who we got married. We've got 2 amazing kids. But I hoped for that. And then I said, okay, well, if I want to hope for that, then I need to start looking for a treatment. If I want to find a treatment that could save me, I need to engage with doctors and I need to start doing laboratory work and you name it. But so point being, reflect on what you're hoping for and then start turning that hope into action.
I love that so very much. David Fajgenbaum, you are such a star. You are an earth angel. Thank you so much for being on Getting Open. I look forward to, I hope meeting you in person one day. I'd love to give you a big hug and high five.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been awesome.
Oh my goodness. I hope you feel as inspired as I do. And I hope you revisit how you think of hope. Hope as an action word. That's so inspiring to me. It really, really is. Okay. I urge you to like and follow the show, subscribe if you're not already doing so. My team and I bring every single episode to you with our full hearts. That's it for today's episode. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Getting Open.